General Flynn also said in an interview that he believed the Chinese Communist Party is behind this. Now, you were a former naval intelligence officer in the Indo-Pacific area. You know China and you know the Communist Party's tactics very well. Do you agree with his assessment? What's your take on CCP's role in this whole thing?
There's no question in my mind that the Chinese Communist Party wanted candidate Joseph Biden to be president. They've stated that over and over and over again in their open source publications, in their press, from China Daily, People's Daily, Xinhua, Global Times, and the PLA Daily. On a daily basis, they make reference to Mr. Biden and derogatory reference to Mr. Trump for the last year. So that's a fact. The other fact is we know that the Chinese government hasn't been happy about having President Trump, who has reversed 40 years of what Secretary Pompeo called blind engagement. I have called it the engagement school, or the Kissinger school of engagement, which I call unaccountable and unconstrained engagement. We just seem to 40 years of unconstrained engagement. We just preach that if we just engage, things will get better. And for 40 years, we did that. America engaged with China at the military level, at the economic level, at the diplomatic level, at the people-to-people level, in social settings, in the NBA, and all sorts of areas. We engaged with China for 40 years. Yet China continues daily to threaten Taiwan's existence. They threatened Japan and the Senkakus. They murdered Indian soldiers this June on the line of actual control. They built 7 artificial islands in the South China Sea, 3 of which are the size of Pearl Harbor. They stole the Scarborough Shoal from the Republic of the Philippines, all while we were engaging. They got to come to Hawaii for the Rim of the Pacific exercises. We did everything with them, yet they spurned our goodwill, and they continue to advance their agenda of the great rejuvenation of China, which is to become the world's global dominant power. And so in the last 4 years, you had an administration that broke from that thinking, challenged the conventional wisdom, and said, no, this is not good, and we need to stand up and challenge what China's doing. Otherwise, we're all going to be living under a system that we see in China, with a social credit system that tells us when we can leave our hotels and our houses, when we can cross the sidewalk, when we can go to the hospital, when we can go to a grocery store, when we can get on a plane and fly, a system that does organ harvesting that has been documented by independent tribunals in England. We have information about 1 million+ people in concentration camps in Xinjiang. We have what's gone on in Tibet for the last 40 years. So we have more than enough evidence to suggest that the 40 years of the Kissinger School of Engagement failed. Now, people in Washington, D.C., and the think tanks like Brookings and other places, and Harvard, they don't like to hear this. And they are now pushing back because they believe that they're going to come back into power. And they are already calling it the Restoration 2020 program. And they're going to restore the program that was in place during the Obama years with virtually the same people that were in the Obama administration will now be in the Biden administration, dealing with China and telling us that we need to cooperate. And even today, we had Mr. Bill Overalt say we should collaborate with China. We should collaborate with them.
Wow. So, yeah, I think the Chinese Communist Party regime certainly doesn't like Trump administration, and they certainly has the motivation to interfere in the election. But in terms of a direct intervention, lately I saw a news said that Dominion system, or at least he's the company that owns Dominion voting system, they received a 400 million injection of money from a Swiss bank that has close ties to Chinese government. So I think there's some maybe direct evidence there. I don't know if you have heard of the news.
I saw that report. While I live in Switzerland, I'm not associated with that bank. But what I would say is all these reports that come up, they demand congressional investigation.
Yes.
We cannot just allow this to come about. And, let's just be honest. Over this 40 years of the engagement school, we have built up a cadre of what they call China hands, the experts on China. And these people have deep connections with Chinese authorities, with the Chinese Communist Party, with their think tanks in the PRC. And they have an arrangement where they go there and they go to conferences and they get put up in nice hotels and they get to go around and meet people, and they then come back and they write these dissertations and theses and articles for foreign affairs and foreign policy and tell us how much they know about what China's really doing and how we should follow their guide. Well, that is a form of influence campaign. It's called psychological warfare. It's political warfare that the PRC has been engaging upon the United States elites for the last 40 years. So even if we don't even take into account the details that you've mentioned about the Dominion system and the infusion of money and those allegations, which we need to look into, let's just put that aside and let's talk about the influence that China has had on the academics and the elites in America and how they've shaped our views of what's happened. We're told that it's a myth that America lost manufacturing jobs to China. That was said today and written in a report that the myth that China stole our manufacturing jobs is not true. Really? That's a fault. Why are we accepting that from elites in America and Washington, D.C., when we have so many people that are unemployed? Or what about the deaths from opioid overdoses and fentanyl that's been brought into this nation from China?
In terms of talking about influence, this influence campaign, I think a lot of people from China actually knows very well what Chinese Communist Party are doing to the Western elites and Western politicians. But I remember once you told me a story about your personal experience. Is this something that you could share with us?
Is this the story about when I was in Hawaii?
Yeah.
Yes. Just a brief story. When I was still in uniform, I attended a briefing with the late Senator Daniel Inouye, and he received a military intelligence briefing about what was going on in the Pacific Theater. It was very much focused on military activities and developments and capabilities and things of that nature. And at the end of the briefing, he turned to the senior officer in the audience and he said, I have this one question. In the previous year, how many congressional U.S. delegations have gone to the PRC and how many have gone to Taiwan? And after some silence, because
rhetoric question,
it wasn't related to the briefing, Senator Inouye stepped in and said, the answer is there were about 10 to 1 to the PRC versus to Taiwan, and it's been that way for years. And so what Senator Inouye was essentially intimating in a very nuanced way, which is the Chinese Communist Party is influencing even our government and our congressional leaders by trips to the PRC and shopping excursions in Beijing at a rate of 10 to 1 compared to what we even hear from Taiwan. And so it doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand that over years that has an influencing effect on the way our government thinks and acts towards the PRC.
Why now that the Pentagon removed these senior advisors, including Henry Kissinger?
Well, this engagement school, as I call it, the Kissinger Engagement School, it's not just in academia, and it's not just in the State Department, or it's not just in think tanks, but it is also in the Department of Defense. And I experienced it in my career. There were people that were very strong advocates for engagement inside the Department of Defense. And I think with the shakeups in the department in the last month, I think you're starting to see this administration recognize that it's time that we, follow through as much as we can and get a new blood in of people that aren't encumbered with this baggage of engagement. I mean, obviously, Dr. Kissinger has financial interests in the People's Republic of China. That's a known fact. Now, I'm not saying he's on the payroll of the Chinese Communist Party, but he has financial interests in China. And that by itself should disqualify him from having representation on a board like the Defense Policy Board. Now, I know some will criticize that. I've heard the criticism, which is to say, well, if you don't have anybody on your boards of this nature that know China or have experienced China, then how can you have a policy with China? Well, the fact of the matter is there's a lot of ways you can understand and know about the People's Republic of China without having had extensive 50, 60-year integration or collaboration with China. And so I think that it's appropriate that this was done. I wish it would have been done on day one of the administration. There's a lot of people that were on that list. And as we discussed previously, a lot of this, many of these changes that were announced could have just been the regular timing of 4, 5, or 6-year appointments to that board. So I know those details, but whatever it is, I think I'm personally happy to see people that have had the engagement school as their guiding principle on boards like the Defense Policy Board removed, and let's get in new people with new thoughts about how to protect America's national security and those of our allies and friends.
Do you think, in terms of the timing of this, do you think it has may have something to do with the election situation, in that it could be a way to prevent classified information from leaking to President Trump's adversary, so to speak?
No, there's many other ways that an incoming administration is going to have access to classified material. So I don't think it's so much about limiting the Biden administration, if they were to come into power, from having access to classified information as much as it is about the Defense Policy Board's purpose is to provide, forward-thinking, out-of-the-box assessment for America's national security. And when I looked at the list of people that were on that board that were being removed, what I saw was they were the establishment. They were the 40 years of engagement school. And I don't know why they were there after 4 years of a Trump administration, but it's not bad that they've been removed to bring in people that are going to look at China with a different view than the conventional wisdom. Because as I said, the conventional wisdom has not put us in a better place. Asia is not more secure and safe today than it was, before these engagers started engaging. Things are worse today. If you're living in Taiwan today, you're under the threat. I mean, we just had Taiwan Minister of Defense Wu come out this week and say he's very concerned about a potential invasion from China. That's very serious, and we should all stop and say, is China getting ready to invade Taiwan? And what are the implications from such an act on America's position in Asia? And what does that mean for alliances like the Quad and other things? And what does it mean to the global economy? And what does it mean for our security of our people in America and our allies in Japan and other places? And that's all been brought about by 40 years of engaging with China. So if we're going to continue just to keep doing the same thing and let China continue down their path towards their great rejuvenation, then fine, then let's keep those people on that board, but then you might as well get rid of the 7th Fleet and the 5th Air Force and the 7th Air Force, and let's bring all of our military back to California, and let's truly be isolationists if that's what they want. Otherwise, we need to stand firm and stand up for our core principles and values of freedom and liberty and free access to markets and freedom of navigation and equal opportunity for all nations.